The cold wind howled through the empty streets as Mark Holloway stood outside an old, abandoned theater. His fingers trembled, not from the chill, but from the weight of the letter in his hand. It had arrived 2 days ago. No return address. No sender, just a single piece of paper with a message that sent shivers down his spine. They never left. The truth is inside. Mark had spent years trying to forget what happened. 33 years ago, his older sister, Claire, had been one of the brightest dancers on the city's ballet team. Along with their coach and 11 other girls, she had disappeared without a trace one winter evening after practice. No bodies were found, no clues. Just the eerie silence of an empty rehearsal hall and a mystery that had haunted the town ever since. His parents had clung to hope for years, refusing to believe Claire was gone forever. But as time passed, the world moved on. The case faded into old newspaper archives, whispered about in hushed tones, but never solved. Some believed the team had run away. Others whispered of something far darker. A local legend even claimed the theater itself was cursed. Mark never believed in ghosts, but standing there now, staring at the heavy wooden doors, he felt something he couldn't explain. A presence, a pull, as if the building itself was watching him. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was thick with dust, the scent of rotting wood and forgotten memories clinging to every surface. His flashlight flickered, casting long, shifting shadows on the cracked walls. Rows of red velvet. Seats stretched into the darkness, untouched for decades. But then, he saw something that made his breath hitch, a pair of ballet slippers, perfectly placed at the edge of the stage. He picked them up, heart pounding. They were small, delicate, and impossibly clean, as if someone had just left them there. Then, the sound of soft footsteps echoed from the balcony above. Mark froze. He wasn't alone. Mark's grip on the ballet slippers tightened as his breath came in short, uneven bursts. The sound of footsteps had been clear, soft, but deliberate, like someone walking on the old wooden beams above. His flashlight flickered again, and for a split second, he thought he saw a shadow move along the balcony railing. His heart pounded as he forced himself to step forward, eyes locked on the upper level. "Hello?" His voice barely carried in the vast emptiness of the theater. No response. Just the creaking of the building as the wind howled through broken windows. He glanced down, at the slippers again. They were exactly like the ones his sister used to wear, light pink with satin ribbons. But that didn't make sense. These looked brand new. After 33 years, they should have been crumbling, faded with time. He placed them gently on the stage, his fingers brushing against the dusty wooden floor. A sudden creak from above made him snap his head up. His flashlight beam caught the edge of the railing where a single hand rested, pale, unmoving. Mark's stomach turned. Someone was there. "Who's up there?" He forced his voice to be steady, but his pulse was racing. Silence. Then, just as he took a step toward the staircase, the hand disappeared. Mark hesitated. Every rational part of him screamed to leave, to turn around and pretend he never stepped into this place. But something inside him, maybe the same part that had never fully let go of his sister's disappearance, pushed him forward. He climbed the stairs carefully, each step groaning under his weight. The second level of the theater was worse than the first. Rows of dusty, broken seats stretched into the darkness, and the air felt heavier, thicker. He scanned the area, but it was empty. Whoever or whatever had been up there was gone. And then he saw it. At the very end of the balcony, pinned to the wall with a rusted nail, was an old photograph. Mark hesitated before pulling it free. The edges were brittle, the image slightly faded, but he recognized it instantly. It was a group photo, the ballet team. His sister was in the center, smiling with the other dancers in their matching white tutus. Their coach stood behind them, a proud but serious expression on her face. Mark had seen this picture before. It had been used in every news report, every missing persons flyer. But this one was different. Someone had scribbled a message across the bottom in red ink. "We never left." Mark's throat went dry. His fingers trembled as he turned the photograph over. There, in small, neat handwriting, was another message. "Find the mirror." He took a step back, his mind racing. What mirror? Why was this here? And more importantly, who had left it? A sudden gust of wind slammed one of the backstage doors open, the loud bang echoing through the empty theater. Mark flinched, his grip tightening on the photo. The rational part of his brain told him it was just the wind, but deep down, he knew something was wrong. A sudden gust of wind slammed one of the backstage doors open, the loud bang echoing through the empty theater. Mark flinched, his grip tightening on the photo. The rational part of his brain told him it was just the wind, but deep down, he knew something was wrong. Swallowing hard, he made his way back down to the stage, his eyes scanning the walls for anything that resembled a mirror. The backstage area had been sealed off for years, but if there was something hidden there, he had to find it. He pushed open the heavy door leading backstage, stepping into a narrow hallway lined with dressing rooms. The air was musty, thick with the scent of decay. Dust covered the old vanity tables, their mirrors shattered or coated in grime. His flashlight beam flickered over the cracked walls, and then he saw it. At the very end of the hallway stood a tall, ornate mirror, untouched by dust or time. Unlike everything else in the building, it was pristine, its silver frame gleaming under the dim light. Mark's footsteps slowed as he approached, a strange unease creeping up his spine. His reflection stared back at him, his face pale, eyes wide. But then, his breath caught. Behind him, in the mirror's reflection, stood a figure. A girl. She was wearing a white ballet dress, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Her face was eerily familiar. Mark's throat tightened as he turned around, but the hallway was empty, his breathing shaky as he turned back to the mirror. The girl was still there, standing just behind him in the reflection, her expression unreadable. Mark took a slow, unsteady step backward. The girl's lips parted slightly, as if she were trying to speak, but no sound came out. Then, slowly, she raised a trembling hand and pointed, not at him, at something behind the mirror. Mark hesitated before reaching out, his fingers pressing against the cold glass. It felt solid, real, but as he ran his hand along the edge of the frame, he felt something, a small gap, a hidden seam. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just a mirror. It was a door. Mark's fingers traced the hidden seam along the mirror's frame, his breath catching in his throat. The girl in the reflection still stood behind him, watching. He turned again, but as before, there was no one there. His pulse pounded in his ears. Whatever was happening in this abandoned theater, it wasn't just in his imagination. His mind raced. If this was a door, where did it lead? And who had left him these clues? His sister had disappeared here all those years ago. Could this be connected? The thought sent a chill through him. He had come looking for answers, but now, standing here, he wasn't sure he wanted to find them. Taking a deep breath, he pressed his palms against the edges of the mirror and pushed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint creak, the mirror shifted. Dust rained down as the heavy frame swung inward, revealing a dark passage behind it. The air that rushed out smelled damp, untouched for decades. Mark hesitated before stepping through. The floor beneath him was uneven, cold stone replacing the creaky wooden boards of the theater. The narrow tunnel stretched into darkness, the walls lined with old rotting beams. His flashlight flickered as he moved forward, illuminating a set, of faded footprints on the dusty grounds mall, delicate, like those of a dancer. His stomach twisted. He wasn't the first person to come this way. As he followed the tunnel deeper, the space widened into a larger chamber. The sight before him made his breath hitch. Old wooden chairs were arranged in a circle, their seats covered in dust. Scattered across the floor were ballet costumes, brittle with age. A music box sat on a small table in the center of the room, its lid slightly open. Mark stepped closer, his fingers hesitantly brushing the metal key on the side of the box. The moment he twisted it, the mechanism inside clicked to life. A soft, haunting melody filled the air. The sound sent a shiver down his spine. He knew this tune. His sister used to hum it after rehearsals. Then, something moved in the shadows. He spun around, his flashlight beam sweeping across the room. For a split second, he saw them figures standing at the edges of the chamber, barely visible in the dim light. They were motionless, their faces obscured, but Mark felt their eyes on him. His chest tightened. "Who's there?" His voice was barely above a whisper. No answer. Just the quiet hum of the music box and the weight of unseen gazes pressing down on him. Then the girl from the mirror stepped forward. Mark's breath caught as she emerged from the darkness. She was younger than he had thought, no older than 16. Her white ballet dress was pristine, but her skin was unnaturally pale. Her dark eyes filled with something Mark couldn't quite place fear. Sadness? A silent plea? She lifted a hand and pointed again, just as she had in the mirror. Mark followed her gesture, his flashlight landing on a crumbling wall at the far side of the chamber. His stomach twisted as he saw what she was pointing at, a name, scratched into the stone with shaky, desperate strokes. Claire Holloway, his sister's name. Mark's knees nearly buckled. His throat tightened as he stepped closer, reaching out to trace the letters. They had been carved deep, as if someone had fought to make sure they were never forgotten. "Claire," he whispered. The girl behind him didn't move. Then another sound broke the silence, a whisper low, barely audible. Mark turned sharply, his flashlight shaking in his grip. The figures in the shadows were gone. The girl, too, had vanished. The only sound left was the soft, eerie melody of the music box, playing a song that had once filled his childhood home. Mark say. Breathing grew shallow as the last note of the music box faded into silence. The air in the underground chamber felt different, no weavier, charged with something he couldn't explain. His flashlight flickered again, and for the first time, he felt the unmistakable sensation of being watched, not just by the girl or the figures from before, but by something else. Something unseen. His fingers ran over the rough carvings of his sister's name, his mind racing. Had Claire been here? Had she tried to leave a message, a sign of what happened, all those years ago? The thought made his chest tighten. If this was where she had vanished, then what had taken her? A creak echoed from the passage behind him. Mark turned sharply, his flashlight sweeping over the entrance. The tunnel was empty, but the sound had been real closer than before. He wasn't alone down here. A sudden gust of cold air blew through. The chamber and the music box, untouched on the table, snapped shut with a loud click. Mark flinched, his pulse hammering in his ears. He had seen enough horror movies to know when to leave, but something deeper kept him rooted in place. He had come for answers, and now he was closer than ever. He turned back to the wall, scanning the stone surface for anything else, any other clue. And then he saw them, more names, faintly scratched below his sister's, one after another, each one belonging to a missing girl from the ballet team. The realization sent a chill through him. They had all been here, but where had they gone? Whisper drifted through the air, soft but clear enough to make his skin prickle. "Help us." Mark spun around, his flashlight jerking wildly. The girl was back, standing at the edge of the shadows. Her expression was different now, desperate, urgent. She lifted her hand, not to point this time, but to press a single finger against her. Lips a warning. Before Mark could react, a loud bang came from the tunnel behind him, like a door slamming shut. The sound reverberated through the underground space, and then footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, coming closer. Mark's grip on the flashlight tightened as the air grew impossibly cold. His instinct screamed at him to run, but his legs felt frozen in place. The girl's eyes widened, and she stepped back, fading into the darkness like mist. The footsteps stopped just beyond the chamber's entrance. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, a voice. Low, whispering, but right at his ear. "You shouldn't have come." Mark's entire body tensed as the whisper brushed against his ear, the words sending a chill through his spine. His flashlight flickered violently, the beam struggling against. The thick darkness pressing in around him. He wanted to turn, to see who or what had spoken, but fear held him in place. His mind screamed at him to run, but his legs refused to move. Then, the whisper came again. "You shouldn't have come." This time, it wasn't just in his ear. It echoed from the walls, from the floor, from the very air around him. Mark swallowed hard, forcing himself to turn toward the tunnel. But it was empty. No movement, no figure lurking in the shadows. Just silence. The girl was gone, and so were the whispers. But something else had changed. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in like a living thing, as if the underground chamber itself was closing in on him. He took a shaky breath and turned back to the names carved into the stone. If Claire and the others had left these messages, then maybe they had left something more, a clue, a way out. His flashlight caught something just below his sister's Namia symbol, faint but carefully drawn. A small key inside a circle. Mark's fingers brushed against the rough carving, his mind racing. This wasn't random. It meant something. Then, the ground beneath him trembled. A deep, resonant boom echoed through the underground space, sending a fine mist of dust raining from the ceiling. The footsteps returned, faster this time, closer. Mark backed away, scanning the room for anything, any escape, any weapon, any sign of what was coming. His flashlight landed on the music box again, and his breath caught. The lid was open, but this time, something was inside. A small, antique key. His hands shook as he reached for it, his mind flashing back to the symbol on the wall. A key inside a circle. Was this what he was supposed to find? Was this what Claire had left behind? But before he could think, the footsteps stopped, right behind him. Mark turned, expecting to see a figure, something solid, something explainable. But there was nothing. Just the cold, empty air. And then the whisper came again. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was laughter. Mark's grip tightened around the small key as the eerie laughter echoed through the underground chamber. It wasn't just coming from one place. It was everywhere, surrounding him, rising in pitch like a distorted melody. His pulse pounded in his ears as he stumbled back toward the carved wall, his mind screaming for a way out. The air had turned unbearably cold, and the feeling of unseen eyes on him was stronger than ever. Then, the laughter stopped. Silence hung heavy in the air, pressing down on him like a weight. He forced himself to breathe, his fingers curling around. The key, as if it was the only real thing left in this nightmare. The symbol on the wall flashed in his mind, the key inside the circle. If this key meant something, then there had to be a lock. Mark's flashlight darted across the chamber, searching. The dust-covered chairs, the broken beams, the music box, nothing. But then, just beyond the farthest chair, he saw it. A small rusted lock embedded in the stone wall, nearly invisible in the dim light. His breath hitched. This was it. Hands. Trembling, he moved toward it, every nerve in his body on edge. The air behind him felt heavier, as if something or someone was watching his every move. His fingers fumbled as he pushed the key into the lock, twisting it with a sharp click. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a deep rumble shook the floor beneath him. The stone wall groaned, and a section of it slowly slid open, revealing a passage narrow, dark, and leading even deeper underground. The cold air that rushed out carried something strange, something unsettling. Not just dust and dampness, something familiar. Mark's stomach twisted. He knew this scent. Faint traces of lavender and old wood. His sister's room had smelled like this when they were kids. He took a shaky step forward, his flashlight beam cutting through the suffocating darkness. The passage was lined with more names etched, scratched, desperate. Some he recognized from the missing persons reports. Some he didn't. But at the very end of the tunnel, just before it disappeared into the shadows, was something worse. A door. A tall, ornate door, its frame covered in the same intricate carvings as the music box. The sight of it sent a deep, primal fear through him. This door didn't belong here. It felt wrong, but he had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, Mark reached for the handle and pushed. The door creaked open, revealing a vast, dimly lit space beyond. Mark stepped inside cautiously, his flashlight flickering against the towering walls. His heart pounded as he realized what he was looking at. It was a stage, not a crumbling, forgotten one like the theater above, but pristine. The velvet curtains hung perfectly. The polished wooden floor gleamed under an unseen light source, and in the center of the stage, frozen mid-performance, stood the missing ballet team. Mark's breath caught in his throat. Claire was there, just as she had been the last time he saw her, wearing her white tutu, her hair in a neat bun. The other dancers stood around her, their expressions eerily blank, their bodies motionless, not dead, not alive, trapped. Mark took a step closer, his voice breaking. "Claire?" Her head turned, just slightly. Then, the unseen presence moved. The shadows at the edges of the stage shifted, stretching, twisting. A figure emerged, not quite human, not quite real. Its shape flickered, its face unreadable, but Mark felt its gaze. "Lock onto him." "You open the door," it whispered. "Now you take their place." Panic surged through Mark as the room around him changed. The stage floor cracked beneath his feet. The velvet curtains rotted in seconds. The pristine theater decayed before his eyes. The girls didn't move, didn't speak. But Claire did. Her eyes met his, full of something he hadn't seen before. Fear. Desperate, pleading fear. "Run!" Mark didn't hesitate. He turned, bolting toward the door, but the shadows lunged. Cold tendrils wrapped around his limbs, pulling, dragging him back. The air grew thick, suffocating, the whispers rising into a chaotic, deafening roar. He fought. Hard. His fingers clawed at the floor, his lungs burned. But then, the key. In one final act of desperation, he reached into his pocket and threw the small key toward Claire. She caught it. And suddenly, the shadows stopped. The theater shuddered. The air cracked like breaking glass. Then light. Blinding, brilliant light erupted from the stage, consuming everything. The shadows shrieked, recoiling. The figures vanished. The whispers ended. And then, everything went silent. When Mark opened his eyes, he was lying on the cold wooden floor of the abandoned theater. The underground chamber, the hidden passage, the stage, they were gone. Just dust, silence, and the faint trace of lavender in the air. Mark sat up, his head spinning. His hands were empty. The key was gone. So was Claire. He looked toward the stage. The ballet slippers were still there, perfectly placed. But this time, there was something else. A single note, written in familiar handwriting. "You found me." Mark's hands trembled as he picked up the note. His fingers traced the edges of the paper, his mind racing. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Claire's. He turned the note over, hoping for some explanation, some clue as to where she had gone, but the other side was blank. The faint scent of lavender still lingered in the air, and for a moment, he let himself believe she was still close, just out of reach. He staggered to his feet, the weight of everything pressing down on him. The underground chamber, the figures. In the dark, the whispers, they were gone, erased like a bad dream. But it had been real. Claire had been there. And somehow, she had broken free. But at what cost? Mark turned to the stage one last time. The ballet slippers remained untouched. A quiet reminder of what had happened here. He had spent so many years searching for the truth, chasing shadows, hoping to bring his sister home. And now she was gone again, but not in the same way. Not lost, not taken. This time, she had escaped. A sense of quiet finality settled over him. He would never get back those lost years. He would never hear Claire's voice or see her walk through their parents' front door again. But she had left him a message. She had let him know she was free. And that was enough. Mark took one last deep breath and turned toward the exit. The theater was eerily silent, as if it had been waiting for him to finish what he started. The eye. Floorboards creaked under his steps, but the sound no longer felt threatening. The building no longer felt like a trap. As he pushed open the heavy theater doors, the morning sun spilled inside, chasing away the lingering shadows. The warmth on. His skin felt almost foreign after the cold of the underground. He blinked against the brightness, inhaling the crisp air. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. He had found the truth. And now, he could let go. The town was still waking up, unaware of what had just happened beneath their feet. Cars rolled by, people walked past, lost in their morning routines. It was strange, how normal everything seemed when his entire world had just changed. He glanced back at the old theater one last time, half expecting to see a figure watching from the doorway. But there was nothing. Just an empty building with too many secrets. A part of him wondered if anyone would ever believe his story. The missing ballet team, the underground chamber, the whispers in the dark, it sounded impossible. But he knew what he had seen, and more, importantly, he knew what he had felt. Claire was out there somewhere. Maybe not in the way he had hoped, but she was free. The others too. The ones who had been trapped in that place for so long. They had been waiting for someone to find them, to break the cycle. And somehow, against all odds, he had. As he walked away, he realized something else. The laughter, the whispers, they hadn't been trying to scare him away. They had been trying to stop him from leaving. Because the moment he had helped Claire escape, the theater had started to crumble. The presence that had kept them trapped had fought back. But in the end, it had lost. Mark didn't know what that meant. He didn't know where Claire and the others had gone or if he would ever hear from her again. But deep in his heart, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. He reached into his pocket, half expecting to feel the small key still there. But it was gone. Instead, his fingers brushed against something else, a tiny scrap of fabric. He pulled it out and stared at it. White, soft, the edge frayed slightly. A piece of Claire's ballet dress. A small smile crossed his lips. A final message. A reminder. Mark slipped the fabric back into his pocket and walked toward the rising sun. The past would always be with him, but for the first time in 33 years, it no longer held him prisoner. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. But sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen.